Today we'll dive into the legendary Blackbeard, Marshall D. Teach, exploring his intricate storylines and discussing the 9 characters who might have a shot at defeating him. In One Piece, the unique relationship between Luffy and Blackbeard, as well as Blackbeard's rare ability to wield 2 devil fruits, is driving the narrative towards its climax. We'll unravel the details about Blackbeard's strengths, weaknesses, and speculate on those 9 characters who could possibly take him down. If you find this analysis intriguing, please give a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. And if there's a character you believe could defeat Blackbeard that I missed, drop a comment and let me know. Be warned, this video contains spoilers up to the 1090th episode of One Piece. So without further ado, let's get into it. First, let's discuss the conditions needed to defeat Blackbeard. Thanks to the powers of his Dark Fruit, Blackbeard can nullify the abilities of other Devil Fruit users. So if you're a power user, you might need to meet stricter conditions to stand a chance against him. We need to consider conditions that apply to both power users and non-power users, as well as those unique only to power users. Let's start with the common conditions for both groups. The first condition is Haki. Since power users lose their abilities when touched by Blackbeard, close combat attacks using Haki are the most effective. Haki proficiency is also a critical benchmark for non-power users, so possessing strong Haki is essential to defeat Blackbeard. Episode 1064 showcases Blackbeard in combat, with effects and sound cues suggesting he might be wielding Conqueror's Haki. While the story is approaching its climax, the truth about this remains unknown. Still, the importance of Haki is undeniable. Defeating Blackbeard, a prime final boss candidate, likely requires mastery over all 3 types of Haki. Additionally, the technique of coding attacks with Conqueror's Haki would be advantageous. So the criteria for Haki isn't just about which type you can use. Future Sight with Observation Haki, mastery in using Conqueror's Haki techniques, and the strength of one's Conqueror's Haki should all be considered when discussing this topic. Next, the second condition is basic combat strength. Given the high likelihood that Devil Fruit powers might be ineffective, a simple raw combat strength without relying on any abilities can be the deciding factor. Hence, those who predominantly rely on their Devil Fruit abilities might fall short in this criteria. Now, the third condition is cunning. Overconfidence, recklessness are your weaknesses. Edward Newgate. As stated by Whitebeard in episode 576, Blackbeard's major flaws are his overconfidence and recklessness. Therefore, it's essential to have the experience and the sharpness to exploit any lapse or oversight Blackbeard shows during a battle. Characters who possess this cunning quality can be said to be well equipped to defeat Blackbeard. Moreover, in episode 1081, he was easily outmaneuvered by Beepo when he suddenly transformed into his Sulong form. From the properties of the Dark Fruit, Blackbeard is likely vulnerable to surprise attacks and ambushes. Next, let's dive into the conditions unique to power users. The first one is evasion ability. The other thing my darkness pulls in is the power of the devil. Marshall D. Teach. In the battle at Banaro Island in episode 441, Blackbeard showcased Kuruzu, meaning dark water. It's a technique that utilizes the gravitational pull of darkness to draw in the physical forms of power users. Since power users lose their abilities upon contact with Blackbeard, how one deals with Kuruzu becomes a crucial factor in defeating him. It should have been proven that you can't escape the pull of darkness. Marshall D. Teach. Even Ace, with his ability to freely transform into and maneuver as fire, was effortlessly pulled in when he faced with Kuruzu. So simply possessing high mobility or speed might not suffice to evade Kuruzu. To completely dodge it, one might need an ability akin to instantaneous teleportation that defies physical laws. Next up, the second factor is power compatibility. My body draws in everything, even pain, more than a regular person. Marshall D. Teach. During the battle at Banaro Island, Blackbeard took most of Ace's attacks head-on. Due to his ability's nature, which even pulls in attacks, he's notably vulnerable to long-range assaults. However, in close combat, since he can nullify abilities with just a touch, those powers that only show their strength in hand-to-hand confrontations may have a disadvantage against him. Also, in episode 1064, Law's Awakened technique, Reroom, was showcased. With Amputate, he created a circle surrounding Blackbeard, which was destroyed by Blackbeard's gravitation, a technique derived from the Tremor fruit. So, abilities that restrict movement or bind the body might not fare well against Blackbeard. To sum it up, the general criteria for both power users and non-power users are Haki, basic combat strength, cunning, and for power users specifically, evasion ability and power compatibility. From these 5 perspectives, I want to discuss characters who might stand a chance against Blackbeard. For figures like Whitebeard or Garp, who are believed to have already peaked, or those who've passed away, we'll consider their strength during their prime. First up, we have Monkey D. Luffy. Blackbeard handed Ace over to the Navy, making him a direct enemy for Luffy, so it's safe to say there's a deep-seated grudge between the two. Furthermore, with Luffy's love for freedom and Blackbeard's desire for control, they're polar opposites. Many expect a showdown between the two eventually. So, will Luffy be able to defeat Blackbeard? Given that Luffy possesses the power of the human fruit, mythical Zoan model, Nika, let's apply the 5 criteria to him. Starting with Haki, Luffy has mastered all types of Haki: armament, observation, and conquerors. In the Whole Cake Island arc, he even learned Future Sight through observation Haki. In the Wano arc, besides mastering Ryo-U, which is a technique to coat oneself with Haki, he's also leading in the technique of imbuing his attacks with Conqueror's Haki. While he's highly skilled in Haki, he's still relatively new to some of these techniques, making it seem he's not on par with legends like Shanks or Roger. So he gets a pretty high rating, but with some reservations. Moving on to basic combat strength, Luffy's attacks heavily revolve around the elasticity and tension of rubber, so we can't say his fighting style doesn't rely on his powers. However, even though he uses his rubbery body, the foundation is pure martial arts. So even if there are differences in attack range or power, it's not like he's significantly weaker without his Devil Fruit abilities. But with Blackbeard's Dark Fruit power, if Luffy's rubber properties get nullified, he wouldn't be able to use his gears, which could put him at a disadvantage. Hence, I'd still rate him pretty high on this front. Next up, cunning. Luffy is the type to challenge his enemies head-on, not the meticulous kind who follows detailed strategies. He's also easily deceived by enemy tricks or surprise attacks, so he's not really cunning. Moving on to evasion ability. Luffy has future vision and is agile, making him good at dodging enemy attacks. But evading these inescapable claws might be very challenging. However, with his awakening as Nika, he can fight in a fantastical manner, which might allow him to evade those claws in some surprising ways. So I'd still rate him pretty high in this area. Lastly, regarding power compatibility, since Luffy specializes in close combat, he almost always attacks up close, so he might be greatly affected by Blackbeard's power nullification. However, since awakening as Nika, he can fight in a fantastical manner. This might allow him to turn surrounding objects into rubber or even attack from a distance, so we can't rule out this possibility. Considering all these factors, Luffy's chances of defeating Blackbeard seem pretty high, especially since, as Nika, Luffy now has infinite potential. Even if he's vulnerable to the Dark Fruit's power nullification, he might find a way to counter it brilliantly. Moreover, his Haki is still developing. Considering that, he might surpass legends like Roger or Shanks in terms of Haki strength. So I believe Luffy can defeat Blackbeard. Next up we have Shanks. Blackbeard is the very person who left those 3 scars on Shanks' left eye, so it's safe to say there's some serious history between the two. Also, right now, both are after the Road Poneglyphs, sharing a common goal. Given the hints in Chapter 1079 where Shanks is shown concerned about Blackbeard's actions, it seems highly likely that they'll clash in the near future. So can Shanks defeat Blackbeard? It's believed Shanks doesn't have any Devil Fruit abilities, so let's break it down based on 3 criteria. First, let's talk Haki. Shanks can masterfully use all types of Haki: armament, observation, and conquerors. Not just that, in Chapter 1055, he showcased his prowess by repelling Admiral Ryokugyu from a distance with just his Conqueror's Haki. In Chapter 1079, he demonstrated both Future Sight with Observation Haki and an attack imbued with Conqueror's Haki, making it clear he's a cut above the rest in terms of Haki skills. Given this, he clearly meets the criteria in terms of Haki mastery. Now on to basic combat strength. Shanks is said to have had legendary duels with Mihawk, who's hailed as the world's greatest swordsman. This suggests that Shanks' sword skills are on par with Mihawk. Now, their duels took place before Shanks lost his left arm, so you might think he's not as skilled now. But during the Marineford War, he blocked Akainu's attack with just one arm, and in Chapter 1079, he took down Kid with a single blow, proving he hasn't lost his touch. So, he's got top-tier combat strength, meeting this criteria as well. Next, let's discuss Shanks' cunning. He made a grand entrance at the tail end of the Marineford War, successfully bringing it to a close. Also, in Chapter 1054, despite his crew's excitement about reuniting with Luffy, Shanks remained cool, calm, and collected, showing off his maturity. However, back in Chapter 1, he was visibly shaken when Higuma used a smokescreen to kidnap Luffy, and in Chapter 96, he struggled after drinking too much, so he has his occasional slip-ups. Given that, his cunning might be rated a tad lower, but when we look at the big picture, Shanks' chances of defeating Blackbeard seem pretty high. Especially because, if we assume Shanks doesn't have a devil fruit power, Blackbeard's dark fruit isn't that big of a threat. In fact, Shanks' immense haki might even give him an edge. But remember, Blackbeard is the kind of guy who wouldn't hesitate to take the Red Hair Pirates or their allies hostage, so it's not a sure win for Shanks. From a story perspective, it's highly likely the climax will be a face-off between Luffy and Blackbeard. So I can say that Blackbeard will not be defeated by Shanks before his fight with Luffy. So even if Shanks has the upper hand in power, it's uncertain if he'd definitely win against Blackbeard. Next up, the third contender, Luffy's real father, Monkey D. Dragon. As the leader of the Revolutionary Army and the world's most wanted criminal, Dragon has a score to settle with Blackbeard, who destroyed their base at Baltigo. It's unclear if Dragon and Blackbeard directly clashed during the face-off between the Revolutionary Army and Blackbeard's crew. But one thing's for sure, Dragon has some strong feelings against Blackbeard because of the Baltigo incident. So, can Dragon defeat Blackbeard? While it's not confirmed if Dragon has a devil fruit power, many scenes hint at a wind-related power due to the gusts that appear whenever he shows up. With that in mind, let's evaluate his chances based on 5 criteria. First off, let's talk about haki. Remember during the Marineford War when Luffy first showed signs of Conqueror's haki? Garp commented, "So he was born with it after all." Now, while it hasn't been confirmed if Dragon possesses haki, it's highly likely he can use Conqueror's haki as well. Given his notorious reputation as the world's most dangerous criminal, it's safe to assume he has a high combat prowess. And mastering Conqueror's haki? Totally within the realm of possibility. And since it's all speculation at this point, I'd rate his haki skills as probably high. Moving on to his basic combat strength. Unfortunately, we haven't seen Dragon in action yet, so I'm keeping my ratings on hold for this one. Next up, his cunning. While there aren't specific scenes highlighting this trait, consider this: he's the chief commander of the Revolutionary Army, managing a bunch of quirky members. And when news broke out about Sabo's supposed assassination, Dragon kept his cool, showing he's a calm and experienced leader. However, since it's not explicitly portrayed, I'll rate his cunning as probably high. Now about his evasion abilities. If our guess is right and Dragon possesses wind-related powers, he likely boasts exceptional mobility. But again, it's all speculation, so I'm keeping this rating on hold. Lastly, let's chat about his power compatibility. This one's also up in the air, since not much has been revealed, so I'm putting a pin in it. But taking everything into account, Dragon's odds of taking down Blackbeard? Pretty high. After all, he's dubbed the world's most dangerous criminal and leads the Revolutionary Army aiming to overthrow the Celestial Dragons. While there's a lot we don't know about Dragon, I'd bet he's on par with the 4 Emperors, or even the Navy Admirals. In Chapter 957, it's mentioned that no pirates have bounties surpassing Roger and Whitebeard. So if we exclude pirates, it's possible someone has a bounty even higher, and that someone might just be Dragon. If that's the case, Dragon's combat skills could even surpass Roger's, making it very possible for him to defeat Blackbeard. Up next is Monkey D. Garp, grandfather to Luffy and father to Dragon. Garp, also known as the hero of the Navy, truly cherished Ace as if he were his own grandson after Roger entrusted him with the child. So it's safe to say Blackbeard is an arch-enemy to Garp. Moreover, in Chapter 1080, we see Garp storming into Pirate Island Hachinosu, Blackbeard's territory, causing destruction and even clashing with the 10th ship captain, Kuzan. This hints at a deep-seated grudge between them. But could Garp in his prime take down Blackbeard? Since Garp doesn't have any devil fruit powers, let's assess him based on 3 criteria. First, let's talk about haki. It's clear that Garp can use both armament and observation haki. In the fight scenes of Chapter 1080, we notice the specific black lightning effect and the sound effect Bari Bari, which is characteristic of Conqueror's haki. From this, it's highly likely that Garp can also use Conqueror's haki. The sheer destruction he caused just by swinging his fist from above without even directly touching the buildings suggests he can coat himself with Conqueror's haki. He's also shown to deliver attacks that have a wide impact range with it. While it's uncertain if he can foresee the future with Observation Haki, his mastery over Haki is definitely top tier. I've grown so weak, Monkey D. Garp. Furthermore, his comment in Chapter 1081 implies he was even stronger in his prime, so it is believed that the Haki in his prime were probably off the charts. Thus, he completely meets this criterion. Now, about his basic combat strength. Known to go toe-to-toe with legendary pirates using just his fists and having cornered Roger multiple times, it's safe to say his combat prowess is on par with Roger's. Chapter 1081 also showcases his impressive speed against Kuzan, suggesting his physical abilities in his prime were simply unparalleled, so he definitely ticks this box too. Alright, let's dive into the cunning aspect. You might think Garp, with a personality even more boisterous than Luffy, isn't the type to devise intricate strategies and might seem far from being sly. However, there are times when his vast experience and age-appropriate wisdom come through, hinting that he indeed possesses a cunning side. That said, he's not a mastermind like Sengoku, so his cunning rating isn't sky high. Taking everything into account, I'd say Garp stands a pretty good chance of taking down Blackbeard. I mean, back in his prime, he boasted power on par with Roger, so if we're talking sheer combat strength, Garp has the edge. But Blackbeard? He's the kind of guy who'll do anything to achieve his goals, and has a sneaky side to him, so he might just outsmart Garp with his tactics. Given this, there's a solid possibility that Blackbeard could turn the tables in a battle. So all things considered, Garp's odds of defeating Blackbeard are still pretty high, but not a sure thing. Up next, we have the fifth contender, Sengoku from the Navy headquarters. Known by the monikers Buddha Sengoku and Strategic Mastermind, Sengoku has stood toe-to-toe with legendary pirates alongside Garp. Moreover, during the Summit War, he threw a shockwave at the rampaging Blackbeard pirates, pushing them back and truly asserting his authority as the top dog of the Navy. But the burning question is, could Sengoku in his prime defeat Blackbeard? Given that Sengoku possesses the powers of the human fruit, mythical Zoan model Buddha, let's analyze him based on 5 criteria. Firstly, let's talk about Haki. It's clear that Sengoku can wield all 3 types of Haki. However, whether he has mastered advanced techniques like seeing the future with Observation Haki or enveloping with Conqueror's Haki remains uncertain. But considering he was the first in Navy history to be confirmed as having Conqueror's Haki through a Vivre card, it's safe to say Haki is one of his strengths. Still, without a clear idea of how advanced he is, we can only give him a high rating. Now, about his basic combat ability. Honestly, there's not much we've seen of Sengoku in action, so we don't really know his fighting style or how powerful his attacks are. But if we go by the fact that he held his own against legendary pirates like Roger and Shiki in his prime alongside Garp, we can assume he's got some serious skills. So he's earning another high rating from me. Lastly, let's discuss his cunning. Being hailed as a strategic mastermind, he led the Marines with precision during the Summit War, masterfully taking down both Whitebeard and Ace. He also manipulated the situation, getting Squard to attack Whitebeard with the help of Akainu, and executed strategies to decimate the pirates with his encirclement tactics. This alone shows he's a brilliant tactician, so he definitely checks off all the boxes in terms of prowess. Alright, let's dive into evasion abilities next. When he transforms into a giant Buddha, one would think his power skyrockets. However, it seems he might lag behind in terms of speed. Moreover, it's believed he doesn't possess evasion techniques like teleportation, so we can say his evasion ability is somewhat lacking. Now let's talk about power compatibility. Given that he can attack with shockwaves without direct contact, it might seem effective against Blackbeard, but considering he's not great at dodging and could be fully exposed to the effects of Blackbeard's darkness, I don't think they're a good match. Hence, he gets a bit of a lower rating on this front. Taking everything into account, the chances of Sengoku defeating Blackbeard seem low. Despite being called a strategic genius and arguably the best in the series at leading large forces into battle, Sengoku might not be as strong in one-on-one fights. Considering he could be completely neutralized by Blackbeard's dark fruit, it seems Blackbeard has the upper hand. So the likelihood of Sengoku taking down Blackbeard? Pretty slim, I'd say. Moving on to Kaido. Kaido's been hailed as the strongest creature in the world, and there's a popular saying, if it's a one-on-one, bet on Kaido. We haven't seen any interaction between him and Blackbeard in the series, but both lead groups of powerful fighters, and there are hints of a connection to the Rocks Pirates, showing some parallels. So, can Kaido defeat Blackbeard? Given that Kaido has the powers of the mythical Zoan-type fish fruit model, Azure Dragon, let's break it down based on 5 criteria. First, about Haki. As only Haki can surpass everything! Kaido. As he mentioned in Chapter 1047, Kaido understands the importance of Haki. He's mastered all 3 types, and even learned the technique to envelop his attacks with Conqueror's Haki. But he was defeated by Luffy, who just recently learned to attack with Conqueror's Haki, suggesting Kaido's proficiency might be below Luffy's. So he's rated highly, but not at the top. Next up, let's talk about base combat strength. Kaido possesses the power of the fish fruit mythical Zoan type Azure Dragon, allowing him to transform into the Azure Dragon and unleash attacks like fire, lightning, and wind slashes. However, he's also skilled in combat using his Kanabu, a type of club, in his hybrid form. So even if his abilities were nullified, he can still throw down with that Kanabu, showcasing his superior base combat strength. Moving on to cunning, Kaido at his core is quite meticulous and serious. But being a pirate, he believes that betrayal is just part of the job and that resorting to underhanded tactics is only natural. So he's definitely got a cunning side. That's why I rate him pretty high in this criteria. Now about evasion skills. Kaido isn't the type to dodge attacks and counter. Instead, he takes them head on and crushes his foes. So we can't exactly say he excels in evasion. So he doesn't quite tick this box. Lastly, when it comes to power compatibility in close combat in his hybrid form, he can't escape the nullifying power of the Dark Fruit. However, in his beast form, launching attacks like flames, lightning, and wind slashes from a distance can be effective, so I'd say the matchup is fairly favorable for him. Taking everything into account, I think Kaido has a high chance of taking down Blackbeard. The reason being his outstanding base combat strength, which allows him to dominate without relying solely on his abilities. But remember, Kaido was already defeated by Luffy. Considering that Blackbeard is likely to be the final boss against Luffy, it's possible that Kaido might be weaker than Blackbeard. However, given the claim that he's the strongest in one-on-one battles, if Kaido were to face Blackbeard one-on-one, the odds might favor Kaido. Now let's discuss Big Mom, or Charlotte Linlin. Born a monster with a ferocity that truly makes her a beast, Big Mom doesn't have any direct connection with Blackbeard. But in Chapter 1064, Blackbeard's crew kidnapped Pudding. So if Big Mom is still around, a showdown over Pudding might be on the horizon. Now, could Big Mom take down Blackbeard? Being a user of the Soul Fruit, let's evaluate her against the 5 criteria. Alright, let's dive right into the concept of Haki. There's no doubt she mastered all 3 types of Haki and even wear the Conqueror's Haki with flair. The level of Haki mastery is undoubtedly top-notch. Yet when it comes to predicting the future with Observation Haki, it falls short, placing her on par with Kaido at best. So when compared to characters like Roger or Shanks who bank on their Haki, she might not quite measure up, hence the generous rating. Moving on to basic combat strength. Big Mom, with her Haki-hardened fist, blew away Luffy in his Gear 4th Boundman form. She also knocked out Page 1 in a single punch with a Conqueror's Haki-infused fist, showing her raw power without relying on any abilities. But Big Mom mainly relies on her homies, created by the Soul Fruit, making her combat style heavily dependent on her abilities. Hence the high rating, but with a pinch of salt. Now let's talk about her cunning. She's a ruthless dictator, ready to take a life without a second thought if you cross her. She's the kind who doesn't pick methods to meet her ends. But her emotions run high and often guide her actions, making her less of a strategic planner. Hence the slightly lower rating. Next up, evasion abilities. While Big Mom boasts impressive mobility riding on her homies like Zeus and Hera, she's not exactly teleporting around. So, can't really say her evasion is top tier. Lastly, let's discuss power compatibility. Big Mom excels in long-range attacks, be it sending slashing winds with Ikoku or raining down thunder with Indra, making you think she's got a good power compatibility. But if her abilities were to be nullified, all her homies could vanish in a heartbeat. Given the significant impact of such nullification, it's hard to say her power compatibility is all that great, hence a lower rating. Taking all these factors into consideration, the odds of Big Mom defeating Blackbeard seem slim. The main reason being, if Big Mom's attack mainly relies on her abilities, she would be directly affected by Blackbeard's Dark Fruit, nullifying her strengths. This would significantly undermine Big Mom's advantages. So it's safe to say, the likelihood of Big Mom defeating Blackbeard is on the lower side. Alright, let's dive into the world of Whitebeard, also known as Edward Newgate. After the passing of the Pirate King, Gold D. Roger, Whitebeard reigned supreme as the strongest pirate in the world. He was also the captain of the Whitebeard Pirates, where Blackbeard had been hiding out for years. The bond with Blackbeard was almost like father and son. But Blackbeard committed the ultimate taboo by betraying his own crew and handing over Ace to the Navy. An unforgivable act. Because of this, Whitebeard pretty much said, "You're no son of mine," and cut ties with him. So the burning question is, could Whitebeard in his prime have taken down Blackbeard? Given that Whitebeard was a user of the Tremor fruit, let's break it down using 5 criteria. First up, Haki. Whitebeard didn't just master all 3 types of Haki, he had a level of Haki that could rival Roger's. Back in his prime, when he clashed with Roger, their Conqueror's Haki was so intense it felt like it could blow the very heavens and earth away. Well, he definitely checks that box. Next, let's talk about basic combat power. Whitebeard, with his Tremor fruit abilities, could cause earthquakes and tsunamis, which is super impressive. But he also wielded his beloved blade, Murakumagiri, showing he could fight without relying on his fruit powers. Just with that, he could fend off attacks from Roger's sword, Kumasari. That alone speaks volumes about his immense combat power. On to cunning. Leading a massive crew of pirates, he's no doubt an exceptional leader. Remember the Marineford War? He literally came in on a submarine, outsmarting top Navy strategists like Sengoku and Tsuru. So yeah, he's got the brains too. But his overwhelming love for his crew and his straightforward nature means he lacks a certain deviousness. So I'd give him a decent rating here, but not top marks. Lastly, about evasion. In his prime, Whitebeard's physical abilities were off the charts, and he could move swiftly. However, the Tremor fruit doesn't really help when it comes to dodging, and he didn't have any special evasion techniques to escape things like the crow's attacks. So he's got a bit of a lower rating in this area. Lastly, let's talk about the compatibility of Devil Fruit powers. The Tremor fruit allows its user to attack from a distance without direct contact, making it a pretty sweet matchup. However, if both combatants possess the Tremor fruit, it's hard to say who'd have the upper hand. But after considering various factors, I'd say Whitebeard has a pretty solid chance of taking down Blackbeard. Why? Because with the Tremor fruit, he can attack from afar without getting neutralized. Plus, he's an absolute beast in combat without relying solely on his Devil Fruit powers. So yeah, I'd bet my money on Whitebeard taking down Blackbeard. Now let's talk about the Pirate King, Gol D. Roger. Roger was the first to conquer the Grand Line and became the legendary Pirate King. He's believed to have crossed paths with Blackbeard several times, given that the Whitebeard pirates were his biggest rivals. But the Blackbeard of that era was still a young buck, so they never really went head-to-head. So, could Roger in his prime defeat Blackbeard? Although Roger didn't have any Devil Fruit powers, let's break it down based on 3 factors. First, Haki. When Roger clashed with Whitebeard, he sent shockwaves so powerful they could have blown away clouds or even islands. So not only could he master all 3 types of Haki, but he also had advanced Conqueror's Haki. And rumors say he could hear the voice of all things, suggesting his observation Haki was off the charts. Kaido once said, just as Roger wasn't a Devil Fruit user, Haki alone can surpass everything. And from Kaido's statement in chapter 1047, it's clear Roger was a force to be reckoned with thanks to his immense Haki. He was probably the strongest Haki user in the series. Next up, base combat abilities. Roger went toe-to-toe with legendary marines like Garp and Sengoku. He also battled legendary pirates like Rox, Shiki, and Whitebeard. Becoming the Pirate King means you're the top dog on the seas, so it's safe to say Roger had the world's strongest combat abilities. Now let's talk about Roger's cunning. While he possesses a keen eye for assessing situations thanks to his vast experiences and high level of foresight, Roger isn't the type to meticulously craft strategies. Like Luffy, who acts on a whim, he doesn't fit the mold of a tactical genius. Moreover, when facing formidable opponents, he seems to genuinely enjoy the thrill of battle and doesn't resort to cunning tactics to achieve his goals. So it's safe to say that he lacks the slyness factor. Taking all these factors into account, the probability of Roger defeating Blackbeard is quite high. This is because his Haki strength and combat abilities are among the best in the One Piece world, and he even held his own against Whitebeard, the previous user of the Tremor fruit, if not outperformed him. Considering this, it's safe to say that the chances of Blackbeard defeating Roger are quite low. It can therefore be said that Roger can defeat Blackbeard. That's my analysis. What do you guys think? That's it for today. This channel posts summaries, explanations, and ranking videos related to One Piece. If you like One Piece, we would be happy if you could support us by subscribing to our channel and commenting. Thank you for watching to the end. See you in the next video.